Hello? Is this working? Peanut, Peanut, can you come and fix this, please? Peanut? Great, thank you, and thank you, Peanut. Thank God you were here to help me out. Please thank Peanut by liking and subscribing the video. So, what we're going to do today is I have asked the VGC community about their competitive Pokemon hot takes, and I'm going to react to a few of those today. Starting off, it's not necessarily the Pokemon used that determine successful battles, it's the trainer that determines successful battles. I think the important word there is not necessarily, because you can't go into a battle with a team full of Magikarps and expect to win, even if you're Wolfie, it's just not happening. But within reason, yes, the trainer, the battler, is more important than any collection of Pokemon, but the collection of Pokemon aid the trainer to succeeding within the meta. Incineroar isn't broken, he just matches up well to strong Pokemon. See, this is a hot take because it's a not very popular opinion, but I think it's true. Incineroar isn't broken, it's just fits well with what it's doing. It's a one-trick pony that does a really good trick. It's not knocking out Pokemon in one hit, it's not absolutely destroying the game with ridiculous multipliers to damage stats. It is what it is. It's the greatest support Pokemon of all time, and you can't fault it for that with the power curve that we have at the moment. It's absolutely possible to win with some of your favourite Pokemon. It's just harder and requires more talent. Yeah, I can see why that's a hot take, because people think that you can't win with your favourites, at least high level players don't, where I think there is an opportunity to, well, look like I am the current world #1 tied Ludicolo player. It's like, it is what it is. You can win with your favourites, but it is harder. I'm not a world-class player at this stage. I'm not a professional. So 5 and 3 will have to do for me for now until next season, but Ludicolo will go away. Ooh, bit of a meaty one, I'll try to paraphrase. Kyogre is super overrated. It's used by new players just because they want to nuke people. It's got super obvious counters that can be put into any team that would be generally helpful. It's even worse than Groudon, since Groudon has more mons that use photosynthesis and chlorophyll, and its only real weaknesses are ice and grass, which it can use Terra Fire to negate and act as an offensive type. As a Ludicolo player, as a Kyogre player, I got Ludicolo on the mind at all times. She's there dancing in front of me. Is Kyogre super overrated? I don't think so. I don't think enough of the population of VGC players rate it at the moment. I don't think it's underrated, I just think it's in usage. It's easy to use to some degree, yes, because Terra Water, Stab, Rain, Terra, like Water Spout, it's just gonna blow shit up. That is what it is, but I don't think it's overrated, but sorry. Flutter Mane is good for the meta. For the current meta, sure. For the general meta, I disagree, because I don't think anything in the current power curve is good for the current meta, and I think that's the difference. It's not that certain Pokemon are too good, it's that the power curve that we've got at the moment is too high, and that needs to be dragged down a touch, so that all of the Pokemon that we've had over the past 9 generations can all stand some equal footing in the competitive arena. I'm not expecting Weedle to like be able to compete in competitive, but you should be able to use Mewtwo, if you get my drift. Regulation I is the worst official format in Scarlet and Violet. Regulation H is infinitely better. While I agree, I can see why this is a hot take, it's difficult because each regulation will be seen as better or worse than the last regulation by some people, but I agree that Regulation H allowed for a lot more creativity, at least during the start of the regulation. Towards the end, it was the same Sneasler nonsense, but at the beginning, there was so much creativity involved, and I think that's just fun. Strong, meta-relevant Pokemon, e.g. Incineroar, Calyrex, Urshifu, Sneasler and Regulation H, are important parts of VGC because they encourage players to improve their team building and player skills to counter and address these threats. They may seem boring, but these make players stronger and keep the game from becoming too gimmicky. I don't think that's a hot take. I just think that's what it is. That's factual to VGC. That is VGC 101. Ooh, interesting one. Grass is one of the best defensive types in the game, despite looking bad on paper. In practice, its resistances are much more relevant than its weaknesses, and its defensive utility, being immune to powder moves, is extremely impactful. Casuals always say it's a bad type, despite being represented in competitive usage stats. Yeah, I agree. I can see why it's a hot take, though, purely because grass is not one of those sexy, beautiful types. It's a utility type. It is what it is. It's not seen as appealing. It's not a fire. It's not a dragon. It's not a ghost. It's hasn't got that excitement about it, and grass types tend not to. One from my good friend Torrent Aegis VGC. Go follow him on Twitter. He was brave enough to put his head in the chopping block here and say that he thinks Calyrex Shadow Rider and Calyrex Ice Rider are fair and balanced restricteds. Sure, they can snowball heavily, but if they do not exist, Pokemon like Miraidon would become the sole threats and have barely any counters. Ultimately, they have awful typings defensively and still require skill to pull off. See, here's the thing, and I'm giving you a little bit of glimpse into the future here. He wasn't the only person to say this. And I think there's a reason for that. It's because of the current meta. The horses were broken last generation. Miraidon is broken this generation. The power curve is still creeping upwards. That's the problem. The problem isn't the Pokemon specifically. We need an eternal balancer, in my opinion. I feel like we'll be hearing that a lot today. Different. The Gen 6 restricteds should have been in this game. Like Yvetta would be pretty good with Terra and could still bully the horses. Xerneas would low-key be fine if they nerfed Geomancy and didn't give it Terra Blast. Togedemaru could bully Miraidon and be good into other stuff, and Zygarde would be there. It would be peak, trust me. Didn't realise Togedemaru was a Gen 6 restricted. One from Lot of Toast on every type of social, so go and follow him for being brave enough to put this out there. Z Crystals was the only good gimmick for VGC. Megas, Dynamax and Terra are all harmful and have created stale team building. Yeah, this is a hot take because I haven't played Sun and Moon personally. I wasn't around in VGC for that generation of competitive Pokemon. But Z Crystals are just not it as far as I'm aware. Just one shot, boom. Yeah, I think Terra ultimately works better in terms of a general equalizer. We should have a format that allows one restricted legendary and one mythical. I don't see why not. I don't necessarily think that's a hot take, it's just not many people talk about it. Mythicals are a bit meh because of a stat-based situation, but yeah, if we're allowed 1, 2, 3 restricted, throw a mythical in there. What's it going to do? Okay, here's a bit of an interesting one because it's not really a specific VGC problem. It's a general VGC problem. There isn't much help for improving the mid-level player base. A lot of social circles with well-known higher-tiered players tend to be closed off, and it's difficult to have access to them, creating a disadvantage for mid-tier players looking to learn. It can feel a bit aimless and harder to make meta calls at larger events without input from more skilled players who tend to keep that information either privy or stuck behind paywalls with coaching. These social circles can be hard to get into, and this makes me feel the VGC community lags behind the FGC community in mid-zone player skill growth because higher players are gatekeeping. Interesting, and I tend to agree, but equally I can understand why. The highest tier players have been in the game for ages, before this huge spike of VGC popularity. And ultimately, if I was in the game from when they were one of the first through the door, dominating the field, and then thousands of other challengers have come up to play me, would I share that information? Me personally, probably, but do I understand why they wouldn't? To maintain that level of dominance? Absolutely. But that's what it is. That's competitive anything. When you get into the realms of competitive anything, you don't give away your secrets, unfortunately. Most VGC competitors win solely because of the Pokemon they use, and skill is slowly becoming meaningless due to the power creep in Pokemon. This is also why some new players can become dominant so quickly and win multiple tournaments each season. They stick to the Pokemon that make the choices for them, and they learn specific lines into other teams. Can agree there is an element of that last point. I have to disagree. You have players running the most meta possible teams, going 0-6, 0-7, 0-8 in big tournaments, while you have Wolfie using Perish Trap and taking it into EUIC and winning the whole thing. I don't think it's just the Pokemon. I think there's a balancing act. You have to be good at the game still. But I can see why that would be a hot take, absolutely. More abilities need buffs to make them even remotely viable. Heavy metal should boost your defense by half, while light metal should boost your speed by 50%. The lightning rod, sap sipper and storm drum abilities need to boost your highest attack stat, since most Pokemon with those abilities use the opposite stat they're boosted in. See, there's a reason they use the opposite stat, and that's because they don't want these abilities being overused and overpowered. But unfortunately, the time in which they generated and created that idea, they've then since swayed away from with the current meta. This post was from the Jurassic Pyro. Please go give him a follow. I don't think it's necessarily a hot take. I think it's probably accurate if we're trying to keep up with the current power creep. If we're trying to reset the power creep a little bit, I think more nerfs, less buffs. Kyogre is the most disrespectful and skillless Pokemon to use. Ladder games against it ultimately come down to gimmick sets over skill. I mean, this is what the other person said, so is it that much of a hot take? Guess not. I'm gonna say this one and just leave it for you guys to... Yeah. Parasect would be a good support Pokemon in Regulation I.
Okay.
Most good moves, Fake Out, Spore, Follow Me, etc. should be signature moves. It would increase diversity and slow power creep. Yes, hot take. Because if you make them signature moves, it doesn't increase diversity. It means that you have more people using those specific Pokemon. Yeah, so yeah, hot take, can't agree. Oh, this one might just be the video title. Wolfie isn't as good as people think he is. He is just the only top level player that has bothered to learn the most powerful strategy, Perish Trap. I'll let you lot decide. I think he's superb. Miraidon is better than CSR. CSR has had its time in Gen 8, but people need to get over it. Some people still say CSR is better are delusional. Miraidon is good in pivoting, sets electric terrain which removes spore threats, has more bulk than CSR, and still does more damage than CSR. Don't think that's a hot take. I think people agree that Miraidon is broken. I think they can also agree that CSR is broken. Power curve. Volt Switch Iron Hands was actually kinda good. I hear it. Was that a bad opinion? Late switching is exactly what Parting Shot Incineroar does. It allows you to get a mon in for free after soaking up a hit. I don't think that's a bad thing. Dynamax was the best gimmick mechanic. I get that it's by far the worst visually and thematically, but in terms of gameplay for VGC, it just added so much to the game. It made so many different Pokemon usable in ways which expanded the tactical aspect. The level of thought into each turn was expanded by what if they Dynamax question. The stat boosts and effects each max move had made new strategies for Pokemon, so often left behind. It was the most varied I have ever seen VGC. The fears of it being overpowered were so overblown. The hate it got is, I think, based on the way it looks, and the bandwagon that other gimmicks have been better artistically, I get that, but competitively I feel Sword and Shield was so alive with weird and fantastic strategies. I miss it. I never got to play with Dynamax too much. I didn't use it much in the story mode because, again, I didn't like it aesthetically, but that isn't to say it wasn't good. And to be honest, I didn't pay enough attention to know that it actually doubled just your HP stat. From what I've seen of it, fine. I don't like. This is a hot take because Dynamax is hated on, but it's hated on for that aesthetic reason and theme reason. But I don't think it's hated on as much for what it is. You take the principles of Dynamax, you call it something else, you make it look cooler. It would go down wonders, I think, in my opinion. Wolfie made a very good video on this. Go and watch that. I think that covers Dynamax quite well. And finally, VGC needs more modes outside of the typical rule set. The regulations follow the same tired formula, which inevitably ends up with too restricted, which arguably is the most meta dominated. It's so diluted to watch and play, and I feel VGC is always at its strongest when people are building and adapting varied teams. Series 6 in Sword and Shield introduced ban list series, in which the top 20 most used mons were unusable, and that was a series I found the most enjoyable in Gen 8. People were adapting, changing, and while a meta began to form, it felt much less constrained. If VGC had multiple rule sets covering these kind of modes, I think it would flourish, similar to Smogon's own tier system, but also including monotype leagues, little cups, etc. I can see why this would be a hot take. Equally, I have to disagree with some of it because VGC, although it has grown, isn't big enough for multiple lots of different level tournaments all over the place. It'll get there because it has to, because there's too much or too many people joining, but I think creating more unique formats is the answer, opposed to having multiple formats at the same time. With that, if you have any hot takes that I didn't say, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will go over them next time. Without further ado, me and Pina say cheerio, and don't forget to like, subscribe and comment below. Bye!